All right, so when our image is placed and we want to have this grid on, this is called our 1-point perspective. I can turn it on or off by doing a shift+Control+I. All right, that would be our perspective grid. But if you have a different grid, if it looks, so if I go to View, Perspective Grid, which is about down here, so these are your options. So do you have something that looks like this, Carolyn? All right, so we can just change that by going back to that list. So if you, by default, if you did a Control-Shift-I and it gave you a 2-point perspective, and this is what we're talking about to start, right? So 1 vanishing point, 2 vanishing points. They have a different type of view, and I don't think it gives us the ability to make as many objects. So to start off, so we're going to say View, Perspective Grid, go to 1 point, and then select that. All right, so now we have our grid visible. Now we want to get so that when we draw that all of the kind of proportions and our vanishing point, or our perspective lines as they're called, go at the right angle. We want to change our horizon line and our vanishing point and then those lines. So let's start. We're going to be looking for this, where is it over here? This kind of tool here on your toolbar. All right. Now, if you don't have the double kind of toolbar, all right, if you only have one column of tools, I think it'd be a good point to change that. So go to Window, Workspace, and choose Essential Classic. Because your Essential workspace only, it does format a little bit differently. But if we go to Window, Workspace, and Essential Classic, it should definitely have that included there. All right, let me take a look. So after we have the grid on, now we want to adjust it to fit to our picture. So as I was mentioning, we have this perspective grid tool. All right, we can, if we click on the center dot, we can move the the vanishing point left and right. And then you have to grab it on the side here to adjust your horizon line. All right, so we're trying to get this vanishing point in on our grid to line up with the vanishing point of the image. All right, so the side dots move up and down, and the center one will move left and right. Okay, after that, we're going to go to these gray little handles down here. All right, if I drag this, we can get the lines to kind of match up with that. So see this diagonal line on the bottom, that should line up like to the bottom of your buildings. So we're going to use this gray little handle or dot to move it to change like the angle of so that they match up in that way. The right side does not have one of those little dots, so I don't know what else. I'm hoping that we won't cause any problems. It's kind of making it symmetrical in that way. Yeah, because this just moves it up and down. I guess that kind of helps out actually. So if I move the center dot down, now my right edge is good there, and then I could take this and just adjust that. Vincent?
Could you help me resize it?
Sure. All right, so to start drawing, the first thing we want to kind of do is lock down our layer and then make a new one. All right, so and actually, so I have this kind of done from before. So you guys probably only have one layer. So let me, I'll kind of get it to looking like that. And also what I have done is I've lowered, what do we call the feature that makes this image lighter or kind of see-through? Opacity, right? So up on the top here, I have my image at like 20%. Now this is your own personal preference. I think if my drawing is this dark, I can't see the grid, and then when I draw over top of it, it's going to be kind of hard to determine what's the part of the sketch and what I'm actually drawing. But you know, whatever was kind of most convenient for you, I'm going to just adjust my opacity, and then I'm going to lock this layer so that I can't accidentally move it or do anything to it. All right. So I would definitely recommend though lowering your opacity to some degree, and then lock that layer, and then we're going to make a new layer. All right. Question. All right, and now I want you to look at the upper left corner of our screen here. Does everybody see this little cube that's showing up right up here? All right, so that little cube indicates which side or face you're drawing on. Because the whole benefit of these perspective grids is that you don't have to, you can use the shape tools and it will put those shapes into perspective. So for this side view of this building here, I'm going to be using, let's see, I don't think it's that face. I think, yeah, this is going to be more of like a head-on image, right? So when I'm doing the fronts of my building, I'm going to be using this cube. But then when I want to do the side of it, I'm going to click on this side and I will click and drag and see how it's making the top of it angled already. And look at the bottom, it's matching also to my line on the bottom. So today I want you to focus on tracing the outlines of all of your buildings. Which actually, now we're seeing though that when I'm dragging this down, the back doesn't quite match the front. So when we're resizing, all right, first we learned about that perspective grid tool allowed us to kind of modify our grid. And then we're going to see if I can find the tool again. Here it is. If I go to the perspective selection tool, let's see, can I resize in here? Yeah, look at that. So this will resize in perspective, because if you noticed when I did it with the selection tool, it was not keeping it in perspective. So when we're making these changes, you're going to press and hold that perspective grid tool, and we're going to use the perspective selection tool. What's also cool about this, we'll be doing windows. Look at what happens when I drag it back. It's actually making the shape smaller and like viewed in perspective.
Hello. Would anybody like orders? Okay.
If you don't want to have to worry about layering, start with the objects further in the back and then work your way forward. Because otherwise, whatever the most recent thing you draw goes in the front, and then you have to do some arrangement. All right, but like for this one, so I would probably even like have this kind of extending down. Wait, that's right, because I'm not using the right face on that one. So that's on there. Nope, wrong face again. So I would draw something like this. Oh. Should be cutting off the bottom. I guess that's hidden in there anyway. So I would draw that on that face. I would take then my, change my cube and then start down here from this one. And then again, we can use the perspective selection tool to kind of modify that afterwards. Reconnect it with that. And then if you had like little pieces sticking up on the top, which tool can we use to join objects together? If we think back maybe to logos and things like that. What if I wanted to kind of connect this little object up here with this one down here? Anybody remember which tool we would use? Vince knows because I just told him, right? What do we use? Shape builder, right? So we select the one, hold shift, select the other one, and then using the shape builder, we can just drag through and it will join those objects together. All right, so we get something like that. Maybe I would say like draw with a white fill and a black stroke, or maybe even draw with no fill so you can really see your different you know, your details and what's kind of inside of there. Tomorrow we're going to talk about applying textures and creating images. So just really get your outlines for today. All right, so I'll kind of just play around with this a little bit. Yes, question? Yep. You can also, don't forget with your shape builder, you can subtract things also. So if we're doing like this building over here, and I have it kind of extending down so I can kind of make sure that line goes all the way through on the base, we can then just draw with your rectangle, maybe make an overlapping shape, and then do kind of the same thing we just did with adding shapes. But instead of after they're selected, we'll hold the Alt key when we're doing the shape builder instead of just joining them together. So I would go into here and I would press Alt. Maybe because these aren't filled. Yeah, this is looking weird here, kind of like it's not going to work for me. Oh, or wait a minute. Probably the wrong screen. That's selecting that strangely. That's a box there. All right, I'll give you a fill in there. We'll fill this in. Now if I select both, do a shape build, and then here we go. Now I can subtract and chop off this part on the bottom. Last thing is talking about other shapes, and then I'll kind of stop for today and let you guys keep working on these and seeing how much you can get done. In your project, I would like to see, I think, 2 compound shapes, I'm going to call them. So this window in here is not just a basic shape. So I can drag this out to make my first shape. We can also put an ellipse in here, right, or a circle. And that would kind of combine that in that way. So I can make these match up and then shape build those together as we were doing before. All right, so that's how you can get something a little bit more complicated with that. All right, so again, try to outline all of your buildings. Don't worry about fill textures. Don't worry about windows. I'm going to show you maybe some cool tricks to do that tomorrow. All right, so just really focus on the outline of them, and we'll continue with details tomorrow. All right, so after you get your basic outlines created, and I've kind of gone a little bit forward with this one, obviously. Did I have a sec? So, like, you know, you went through and you traced all your outlines of your buildings. Then we're going to go back, and actually today too, maybe we'll talk about the windows too, and a couple keyboard shortcuts. All right, so and the ordering that you do things in doesn't have to be the same as I did it. You can kind of bounce back and forth. All right, but let's say we wanted to do these windows. All right, we can start with just a rectangle like we did. All right, but to copy them at a distance, all right, I would recommend instead, I mean, you could just redraw them, but probably what's going to happen is your lines aren't going to really match up on the top and the bottom. All right, so if I did a straight up copy using the selection tool, you know, copy, paste, it's going to be the same size. And then you have to resize it, and it's just more work than you really have to be doing. All right, I mean, you can do it, but I always try to find the quicker way. So instead, if we use this perspective selection tool, and then if you hold the Alt key, we can make a copy of it, and it goes back into that distance. So it's automatically resizing it so that the top and the bottom line up there. So again, that's using the perspective selection tool. And then if we hold the Alt key, our mouse turns to the double arrow, which allows us to copy and paste basically in one motion. All right, so that's what I would recommend doing for your windows. And actually, if you hold the shift key, it's going to constrain it so I can't go up. Well, you can kind of go up and down, but it will snap to your grid a little bit better. So that's what I'm going to recommend doing in your windows. And that's going to, because if you don't, then your perspective lines are not going to match up like we were talking about in that grading criteria, right? So this copies and pastes kind of in one motion. All right, the next thing that I wanted to point out was that our colors, all right? These just have a solid color, but I'd like everything to have like a texture, a pattern, or even an image. All right, so I'll start with some of the easier ones. And for today, as a science grade, I would like to see you have a pattern and a texture applied to two surfaces of your buildings, just so that I know you know how to do it, all right? You don't have to, you can take it off when you're done if you don't like the way it looks, but I would like you to just basically show that you have them. All right, the first one is kind of like a realistic effect. So if we go up to the effect pull down and go to texture, and then go to texturizer, you'll get a pop-up that shows up here. All right, you have craquelure, you have grain, you have mosaic, patchwork, stained glass, and texturizer. All right, the mosaic might be good. You have a bunch of different options here too, though, right? So you can really go through these, and you have a bunch of different options, which then you can adjust the detail of it afterwards. So, you know, some of them aren't really realistic looking. I think if you're really looking for realism, you're going to, instead of using these artistic ones, we can go to the texturizer, and then you have sandstone, you have brick, right? These are buildings, so brick would be kind of realistic looking. You can adjust the scaling of it, so the size of the little bricks in there. And then relief would be the depth of those bricks, like the cracks in there. All right, and you'll also see that the colors are determined by your fill and your stroke. So we see a brown and a yellow in here, and if I was to look at my toolbar, I would have that there. All right, so once I find an appearance that I like, I'm going to press OK. And then it applied that to the building in there. All right, so that was our texture. The second one are patterns. So these are a little bit more artistic if you want like a crazy cityscape that's not very realistic. What you can do is go to Window and Swatches. And then if we go to our Swatch library, all right, we're going to see in patterns, I mean, you could play around. Most of these are just solid colors. Like if you look, they're just solids. But if we go to our Swatch library and go to patterns, then we have three base options. Basic graphics. These are going to be like textures. They are kind of transparent though. So see, I'm still seeing behind this. That's, you know, there's not really, it's transparent around that. One of my students in the morning copied the shape though. If you don't want that like transparency, you can copy the shape and put a solid one behind it. All right, but that's just one category. If I go back to my patterns and choose decorative, and you know, we just do something like this, now we get some kind of funky stuff, which lattice and some brick patterns there, some different kind of combinations there, right? So that would be a pattern. All right. So I'd like everybody to apply a pattern and a texture to two surfaces of your buildings right now. The last part of this, which may be helpful to you, is to combine and remember our shape building tools, right? And so we kind of talked about that perspective selection tool, right? But if we have objects, like maybe I'll redraw this face, right? Because some of these objects can be complicated to draw. So maybe we started with this one here. We see it being a rectangle and a triangle. So if I'm drawing this in perspective, I would choose the right face of the cube first. So I would draw this, bring it down like here, like so, right? You could try using the triangle on this. I'm not exactly sure if it's going to line up, but if you wanted to try, remember the polygon tool, if I click and drag, I can hold the down arrow key or press it to get a three-sided shape. And then we could use this perspective selection tool to drag this into position. Come on. Alright, I don't know why that one wasn't grabbing there. Let's try that again, and maybe if I put a fill color in it, it will be a little more easily selectable. So now, well, it's not letting me do this to resize a triangle. So alright, so this would get me to my next point in using the direct selection tool. So now, I think we were looking at this before. I can click on the point, I can drag it out. Alright, so that's the overall proportions of this shape. I guess I don't have my background image locked. Now to use the shape builder, remember your shapes have to overlap. So my triangle is overlapping. And the process for using that, select the first shape, hold shift, select the second shape. Then we select the shape builder tool and we drag through. And that will combine those two shapes into one. Alright. So that should allow you to combine simple shapes to make compound shapes. Oh, and the last thing for the images, all right? If you wanted to do something like that, if you find a picture, which I had an AM student find an image of like a building facade, right? So I guess you could kind of say this is cheating, but not really. So if we do like, because it's still using an option for a building treatment. So if I do like, I don't know, building with windows. Right, if we do an image search on that, all right, find something like this. All right, so you could use this. Oh, you guys don't see it. So if we found any of these images, all right, instead of recreating all this stuff, I can copy the image. You can't see what I'm doing. So I can say copy image. And then go back to Illustrator, and if I do a paste or edit, paste, so there's our image. Now we have to image trace it because if we were to use the direct selection tool, it doesn't really resize. We can't do that. They also, so what we're going to do is image trace it like we've done in the past, high fidelity photo, and then if you just expand it, now we can use what's called the perspective. There's a perspective or free distort, and now I can take these corners and I can drag them so it would match the proportions of our building here. All right, so we can just drag that up into position, kind of like we did with that last part there. Now, I don't know how it's going to look here in the end, but let's see. So that would be another way to make your windows. Maybe you think of it as cheating, but that does look actually pretty close to perspective, right? We see our windows getting smaller, and it gets foreshortened, as it's called. All right, so your images, you're placing them, and then you're just doing your image trace, expand, and then in the free transform options here, where'd that go? I lost, oh, this was, there was a free distort tool that was in there. I don't know where the window went now, but it should be within here, the free transform. Maybe because I don't have anything selected. So now if I go, there we go. All right, so once that image is selected, then you would choose free distort. All right, so those should give you many options for filling in the sides of your buildings to make them as realistic looking or as abstract as your imagination can create.